Welcome. I'm Catherine Magana here with Steve Wolf, Rachel Ivanovich, and Greg Carroll. And today we're going to have a conversation about retirement planning mistakes. Retirement might seem far away or it might be right around the corner. And over the years, we've helped a lot of different clients. And one of the items that comes up is retiring too soon. And so as we do financial plans and retirement plans, looking at the numbers, there's been times where we've helped clients see that perhaps they shouldn't retire as early. One of the things that comes up is longevity. People are living a lot longer these days. We just had a couple of clients. One, her mom passed away at age 100. And so once again, that's a long lifespan. If you're retiring at 55 or 65 and you still need your money to last over a long period of time. But once again, going back to the client we were working with, they were thinking of retiring. And so we ran some scenarios for them. And working one more year or even 2 more years was a game changer. And that made the plan work so much better. We were able to run different scenarios and look at that with them and share with them the impact of retiring early or waiting a little bit longer. So the numbers are the numbers. I mean, obviously they're just projections, but when you look at the numbers and as you're trying to plan ahead, knowing going into a retirement that you don't have enough, that's not going to give you peace of mind. And we're here to help you make sure that you have enough and that you're making those right decisions.
We also met with the client, I think the same week. And one of the other issues was the fact that they thought they were going to need help later on in their years. And they didn't have long-term care insurance. And so therefore, I mean, they were saying, I think we're going to need, $35,000 a year to have someone live in our house because we have a room where a caregiver could move in and that would, we'd cover their room and board, but then we'd also need to pay them $35,000. And so, like you said, Catherine, we ran several scenarios. We were able to really look at that situation and say, okay, well, if you work another year and a half and you save this much, you'll actually be able to retire in a year and a half, and you'll have that money available to cover your long-term care needs.
I think that a lot of financial planning consists of looking at that dollar value that you need to live off, and making sure you're financially stable. But the other side of it is the emotional toll it takes when you retire. And like you said, Catherine, we're living a lot longer, so that retirement is a lot longer. And so if you decide, hey, maybe I've got that financial piece figured out, if I quit my job, but all my friends and family are still working, you might get a little lonely and become detached from them in a way you never thought about. And so I heard someone suggest one time, take a stay vacation, a long one, and see how fun it is after a week or so. And you might have a new perspective on, how that might look for the next 20, 30 years. Because of that, if you decide you change your mind and you want to go back to work, well, that old job might not be available. And you might not be able to get hired like you were as a younger person, because if you're older, there is discrimination out there. So you want to think about a lot of other things besides just the financial aspect.
You make a good point. I mean, you could also look into phasing into retirement, or maybe you're working consulting or doing part-time, or what is this?
Sure.
It's not sometimes it doesn't have to be one size fits all, stop and that's it. I mean, there might be other ways to factor that in.
Yeah, part of it could be a loss of purpose. There's a lot of people who work and feel like they have a purpose, and all of a sudden they retire and they don't know what to do. Now, there are some people who thrive in retirement, and I guess it depends on when, but we're talking about people who we think are retiring too soon. And usually we're saying probably somewhere south of 65. So 50 years old, 52, 55, which also means that if you're wanting Social Security, and you're probably pretty well versed on that could be a problem, correct?
It could absolutely be a problem, because if you are still working and you're under full retirement age, then your Social Security benefits will shrink substantially.
Could be 30% less.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's part of it. Inflation is also going to be an issue too. Are you making enough in retirement to cover inflation? And again, this is something we talk about a lot, and people don't really grasp what that really means. But if you think about 30 years ago, how much did a car cost? How much did your home cost? How much was a pound of sugar? Any of those things. And now what is it today? It's way higher. So if you start looking at what dollars are going to be in the future to buy the same good, it's a very difficult thing to get over. So sequence of events too, sequence of returns is something that we don't talk about enough. If you retire early and you think you have a good nest egg, and all of a sudden that first and second year, the markets go bad and you don't have nearly as much money, it's hard to make that up because you're using that money now. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong. The other thing too I was thinking about is when you are working, and look, there are plenty of people who can retire at 50 and be fine.
Yep.
All right. But we're talking about the ones who really can't, and a lot of people don't like their job, and I understand that. But if you stop working, do your skills deteriorate? Does your mental capacity deteriorate? And sometimes it does. Now at 50, you may not see it as much as when, people are older and they retire. But I think that, again, going back to Greg, what you were saying, I think that's really important.
Case in point, we have clients who they had a plan that absolutely worked. And she was super excited to retire. Her husband was a little bit older and had already been retired for a few years, and he was out playing golf all the time. So she thought, what, I'm so excited. I'm going to go play golf. I'm going to have all this time on my hands. And she retired, and they did have enough money, but she was bored after a short amount of time. And so she decided, what, I'm going to take a job and work at the golf, at the golf course. And so she's super happy now. So she's got the purpose that you were just mentioning and a little bit of extra money coming in to fund vacations and other fun things.
And sometimes we see that some of that time goes into volunteering or nonprofits. And as we've been involved in the community, I tend to see that there's a lot more engagement with those that are retired.
Yeah, they also like to play golf.
They do.
But, so what can you do to maybe mitigate some of this stuff? One is to have a comprehensive financial plan. All right.
Yes.
We can't stress this enough. I know people, it's a financial plan. I don't really need it. But I'm telling you, a financial plan makes a lot of sense. It is your blueprint.
It gives you peace of mind.
It gives you peace of mind. And it's not a plan that you do it one day and that's it for the rest of your life, right?
Oh, yeah. No, it changes. I mean, you have a plan in place, but then every year you should go back and look at it. And then what are your, what else is coming up in your life, or there are some updates that you want to.
Well, and then there's healthcare. I mean, we didn't really talk too much about healthcare, but if you are not working and maybe you don't have healthcare insurance now, you're not getting government insurance yet. Okay. So there's that, 5, 10, 15-year window that you could be responsible for all of it. That's huge. So one of the things you need to do to mitigate that is some healthcare planning. Maybe looking into some long-term care if that's appropriate. So healthcare planning is another one.
You make a good point, Steve, because if you do retire too soon and you're not yet old enough for Medicare, you're going to have to pay for that health insurance for all of those years. That
is very expensive.
It's so expensive.
So we have a young client, they want to retire young, and they actually they're at a good place and they can, but that is the big concern.
Is one of their biggest concerns is how are we going to fund our health insurance if we retire? I mean, they want to retire at age, 50? Yeah. Yes.
Lifespans growing longer is a blessing and a curse. Yeah. It's a blessing. I mean, as long as we're in good health, instead of, 100 years ago, the lifespan was what, 45 years old or something like that, 50 years old. Maybe a little bit more. And matter of fact, when Social Security came in, 65 was the age at which most people died. When they did 65 years old, they figured, we're not going to have to give out too much. But now, I think I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm guessing in the 80s now is what we're living to on average.
So I saw statistics. It says half the men who reach 65 will live to at least 85, and half of the 65-year-old women will live to at least 88.
So there you go. So
and then the chances of one of them living into their 90s
is
very high as well.
Right. And I think from a percentage standpoint, I believe that people living over 100 is the fastest growing group.
Demographic, yes. Yeah. I read that too.
So we're living longer. So, when you think about it, okay, you retire at 50, 55, let's say, and you're probably going to live to
45 years to play
35,
golf.
45, or 50 years on what you have with inflation, with everything else. It's a long time. So, from my perspective, I urge people to continue to work unless you're just filthy rich, it doesn't matter.
But even then, like you said, purpose is important, right? You said the emotional aspect where all my friends are still working. What should I do?
Yeah, so I like what Catherine said is, phase into retirement is probably going to be a bigger part of a lot of people's retirement
Or maybe even
plans.
a second season where this was my career for 40 years, and now what am I going to do for the next season? Maybe something with less responsibilities.
And we talked a little bit about what can give you purpose. Things like finding hobbies. volunteering, part-time work, et cetera. So there are things that can give you purpose, or, for some people, it's taking care of their families.
Yes.
That
Spending
gives
time
them-
with grandkids and
Right.
family. And
Right. And finally, I think one way to mitigate it is continual learning. Keep your mind active through learning and new experience, and that can help prevent cognitive decline. Now, with AI going the way it's going, we might have some cure for cognitive decline, but until then, I think
Learn to play a musical instrument.
learn a new
That is supposed
language,
to be good.
learn a lot of things like that. Just keep your mind going, and that's really important. So I think that those are some of the things that can happen when you retire too early. There's some of the ways you can mitigate those problems, and we hope that helps. Thanks.
Please stay tuned for important disclosures. The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future results. Any indices referenced for comparison are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. As always, please remember investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional. WWM Financial is a registered investment advisor with the SEC.